This hearing will come to order. We welcome our witnesses, all of them, and others who might be in the audience. 71 very difficult, very painful days have passed since the enormous disaster in the Gulf began. And with every day that goes by, the economic and environmental damage grows worse and worse. While we don't know the exact number, experts estimate that up to 6.9 million barrels of oil have spewed out of the Gulf, out of the pipe into the Gulf, wreaking one kind of havoc on coastal communities, workers' livelihoods, and fragile wetlands. At the very heart of this, and the greatest environmental catastrophe in American history is what we're talking about, is something equally as important, and that is a very human tragedy. The explosion that occurred on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig on April 20th killed 11 workers, injured 17. Since then, at least 2 more response workers have been killed on the job. Like so many men and women in the Gulf region and in communities across America, they took pride in their jobs, worked hard at their jobs, hard jobs indeed. And they loved their communities. They provided for their families, even if their work was not always appreciated or understood by outsiders in the rest of the world. It's that way in coal mining. It certainly is that way in the work that was done by these folks who were on those platforms. For the survivors and loved ones, some of whom are here today, the nightmare is obviously just beginning. Put another way, it's far from over. Livelihoods have disappeared, and the fabric binding these families together has been torn, leaving a terrible sense of loss and incredible uncertainty. I'm deeply disturbed by reports that different families will have access to, in fact, different relief, depending on their loved ones' jobs and where they were killed. It is my understanding today that Transocean, the owner of the Deepwater Horizon, is seeking to limit its liability for this loss in federal court under a legal loophole that is both unconscionable and outdated, hence part of the reason for this hearing. Transocean's cold and calculated efforts to avoid taking full responsibility for their actions, or rather inactions, shines a very bright light on a serious problem, which is a lack of accountability and equal treatment under the law. We cannot allow that, in this Senator's judgment, to continue. There are 3 simple questions that I hope we can answer at today's hearing. 1, do our maritime laws need to be updated? 2, are all injured parties being treated fairly under these laws? And do the distinctions that allow for people to be treated differently make any sense at all? Are the parties, 3, responsible for causing the harm being held fully accountable? Or are they using outdated laws to escape paying their fair share? Let me be clear. Employers whose negligence causes an employee or anyone else's death should be held fully accountable for the pain and the suffering they cause, regardless of where their death takes place. Companies that do harm should not be able to hide behind statutes from 1851, for heaven's sakes, to avoid paying for the harm they have caused. And the courts should have the power to make an example of a company that disregards its workers' safety. I firmly believe a consistent culture of workplace safety must form the bedrock of any serious and responsible industry. Whether you're operating a rig in the Gulf, or as I indicated, a mine in the coal fields of West Virginia, these core principles depend upon business doing the right thing, and governments, by the way, enforcing the law. And that cannot be allowed to change simply depending on the location of where the work is and was done. Today's hearing is an important opportunity to hear from you, the families who have been affected so painfully by this awful disaster. You have our nation's heartfelt sympathy. We want to honor your loved one's sacrifice and make conditions safer for all workers. Your voice today, in the weeks and months ahead, is absolutely essential. Again, the reason for this hearing. Thank you for being here and for sharing your stories with the committee today. I know full well that it cannot be easy. Please know that the committee will continue to work on these issues to make sure workers and their families get the protections they deserve and make sure those who caused the harm are held fully accountable. We have a fundamental obligation to bring real accountability and fairness to a system where it has been sorely missing. You have my commitment that we will do that. I call on my very distinguished and very excellent ranking member.